My parents skipped my baby's funeral to go to my brother's pool party, they said. It was just a baby. His party is more important. I buried my child completely alone that day. They had no idea what I was about to do next. The dirt hitting the white lacquer of my daughter's casket sounded like thunder, a final, hollow drumbeat that signaled the end of my world, while 3 miles away, the people who gave me life were clinking champagne glasses by a shimmering blue pool. As I stood there, knees buckling under the weight of a grief no mother should ever know, my phone buzzed in my purse with a notification that would shatter whatever pieces of my heart remained, confirming that to my parents. My daughter's funeral was simply a scheduling conflict they had chosen to resolve in favor of a party. Before I tell you how I forced them to look at the wreckage they caused, and how I made them face the consequences of the most heartless choice a family could make, let me know where you are watching from. Because this story is about the kind of betrayal that makes you question the very definition of family. I'm Abigail, and at 29 years old, I found myself standing in the Garden of Angels section of a cemetery, staring at a hole in the ground that was far too small to be real, yet large enough to swallow my entire future. My daughter, Emily, was only 6 months old when sudden infant death syndrome, that thief in the night known as SIDS, stole her from us. But the story I need to tell you isn't just about the tragedy of losing a child, it is about the tragedy of realizing you never really had parents to begin with. Growing up, the hierarchy in our house wasn't just a feeling, it was a physical reality, as tangible as the furniture in the living room or the cars in the driveway. My brother Jason, who is now 32, was the sun around which my parents, Margaret and Richard, orbited with blinding devotion. From the moment he took his first breath, he was the golden child, a term I wouldn't learn until years of therapy later, but a concept I lived every single day. If you've ever felt like a guest in your own home, like a background character in the movie of someone else's life, then you understand my childhood. When Jason made the varsity soccer team in the 10th grade, it was treated like a national holiday. My parents threw a massive backyard barbecue, inviting neighbors, distant relatives, and colleagues to celebrate his athletic prowess, with my father grilling steaks and my mother beaming as she recounted his tryouts play-by-play. That same year, when I was accepted into the competitive honors program, a rigorous academic achievement I had spent months studying for, the reaction was a masterclass in dismissal. I remember walking into the kitchen, acceptance letter trembling in my hand, and my mother simply glanced up from her magazine, offered a tight, polite smile, and said, "That's nice, Abby," before immediately pivoting to ask Jason if his jersey was clean for the game on Friday. That was the pattern, etched in stone. Jason's average grades were praised as the efforts of a well-rounded young man, while my straight A's were expected, unremarkable, and, frankly, boring to them. By the time I reached high school, I had stopped chasing their validation because it's impossible to catch something that doesn't exist. I accepted my place in the family hierarchy, occupying the shadows while Jason basked in the light. I focused on building my own life, pouring my energy into academics and forging friendships with people who actually saw me, people who valued my thoughts and my presence. It was during my sophomore year of college that I met Michael, and, honestly, meeting him was like learning a new language. He came from a family that was warm, loud, and relentlessly supportive, a dynamic that initially felt alien, almost suspicious to me. I remember the first time I had dinner at his parents' house. His mother asked me about my classes and actually waited for the answer, her eyes locked on mine, genuinely interested. When Michael achieved something small, like fixing a leak in his apartment or getting a good grade on a paper, his parents expressed pride that seemed almost theatrical to me, until I realized with a pang of sorrow that this wasn't theater. This was what normal family love looked like. Michael and I dated throughout college, creating a sanctuary of mutual respect and love that I had never known growing up. We married 3 years ago when we were both 27, and he is an architectural engineer while I work as a pediatric nurse, a career born from my desire to care for others in the way I hadn't been cared for. We bought a small, cozy starter home about 40 minutes from my parents and an hour from his, and I have to admit, the distance from my family was intentional on my part, a geographical boundary to protect my heart, though I never fully admitted that to Michael at the time. When we announced we were pregnant, the contrast between our families became so stark it was impossible to ignore. Michael's parents immediately erupted into happy tears, starting a group chat to plan the baby shower, asking about nursery themes, and sending us helpful articles about childbirth and parenting. When we told my parents, the silence on the phone line was heavy enough to crush me. Finally, my mother said, "Oh, that's nice, dear. Did Jason tell you he might get promoted at the firm?" They attended the baby shower Michael's in-laws organized, but they were there in body only. They spent the entire afternoon holding court at their table, talking loudly about Jason's recent luxury vacation to the Bahamas, showing photos of him on a jet ski while I was opening onesies and diapers a few feet away. Jason's life had always followed a predictable trajectory of high-status success. After college, he joined a prestigious marketing firm, bought a gleaming luxury condo downtown, and dated a string of increasingly attractive women. Each of his achievements was celebrated with lavish dinners and expensive gifts. When he purchased his condo, my parents quietly cut him a check for the down payment, a sum of money that could have paid off my student loans twice over. When I mentioned this discrepancy once, in a moment of weakness, my mother simply sniffed and said, "Jason has a more expensive lifestyle to maintain, Abby. You and Michael are more practical people, you don't need as much help." Then came Emily. She was born on a snowy January morning, arriving with a cry that sounded like music and a face that matched Michael's dark hair with my blue eyes. Holding her for the first time, I felt a love so intense it physically hurt, a fierce, protective instinct that rewrote my DNA in an instant. Michael's parents were at the hospital within hours, bearing balloons, teddy bears, and weeping with pure joy as they took turns rocking her. My parents came the next day, breezing into the room with the energy of people stopping by the post office. They stayed for exactly 45 minutes, checking their watches, and left when my mother suddenly remembered she had a hair appointment she couldn't possibly reschedule. Over the next 6 months, Michael's parents visited weekly, bringing casseroles, folding laundry, or just holding Emily so we could nap. They took thousands of pictures, created a special photo album, and constantly told us what a beautiful family we were. My parents visited exactly twice. One visit was 3 weeks after her birth, and only because my mother's book club friend insisted on seeing the baby, so my mother needed a prop. The second was when they happened to be in the area for one of Jason's work dinners. They held Emily awkwardly, stiff-armed, as if she were a ticking bomb, and seemed visibly relieved when she started crying and I took her back. Despite their indifference, I kept trying. I sent them weekly photo updates of Emily's milestones, her first gummy smile, the first time she rolled over, her belly laugh that sounded like bubbles popping. My mother would occasionally respond with a generic thumbs-up emoji. My father never responded at all. Then, 2 months before Emily died, Jason announced his engagement to Stephanie, a pharmaceutical sales rep he'd been dating for 8 months. My parents immediately shifted into high gear, planning an elaborate engagement party that would rival most weddings. My mother called me daily, not to ask about her granddaughter, but to give updates about the venue, the caterer, and the exclusive guest list. The party was scheduled for the same weekend as Emily's dedication at our church, a ceremony my parents had already committed to attending months prior. When I gently reminded my mother of the conflict, expecting her to realize the mistake, she simply said, "Oh, we'll have to miss the baby thing. This is Jason's engagement, Abby. That's a once-in-a-lifetime event. A baby dedication only happens once too, but, well, you understand." I wanted to scream, to rage, to demand she value my child, but I swallowed the words as I had so many times before, retreating into the habit of being the good daughter who doesn't cause trouble. A week before Emily died, She developed a slight cold, nothing serious, just a runny nose and some congestion. I was vigilant, taking her to the pediatrician who assured me it was a minor viral infection that would resolve on its own. Still, being a nurse and a first-time mother, I took a few days off work to monitor her. By the weekend, she seemed completely back to herself, eating normally and smiling that smile that melted my heart. I had no way of knowing those would be the last golden days of my life. It was a Tuesday night when our world collapsed into dust. Michael and I had put Emily to bed around 8 p.m. after her evening bottle. She had been happy, babbling at the mobile above her crib, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. We had a quiet dinner, watched a show, and went to bed around 11 p.m. The baby monitor remained silent all night. In retrospect, it was too silent. When I woke at 6 a.m. for my early shift at the hospital, the silence in the house felt heavy, oppressive. Emily usually woke around 5 a.m. for a feeding, her little cries acting as our alarm clock. I walked to her nursery, the room we'd painted a soft, buttery yellow with hand-stenciled woodland creatures on the walls. I expected to see her looking up at me, reaching for the bars of the crib. Instead, in her white crib, surrounded by the stuffed animals given to her by Michael's parents, Emily lay still. Impossibly still. "Emily?" I whispered, my voice trembling. I touched her cheek. It was cold. A coldness that I can still feel on my fingertips if I close my eyes right now. What happened next exists in my memory not as a continuous event, but as disjointed, violent fragments of horror. My screams, primal and unrecognizable, waking Michael. The sound of his heavy footsteps pounding down the hallway. His hands pushing me aside to perform CPR on our daughter's tiny body, counting out the compressions through his sobs. My trembling fingers failing 3 times to dial 911 before connecting. The dispatcher's calm, mechanical voice asking questions I could barely comprehend. The arrival of paramedics in our peaceful suburban home was a chaotic blur of static radios and heavy boots. I watched their grim faces as they continued resuscitation efforts, knowing by the set of their jaws that it was too late. The ambulance ride was a silent tunnel of despair, staring at Emily's motionless body strapped to the stretcher. The hospital's bright, fluorescent lights felt like an interrogation. Then a doctor with kind, sad eyes delivered the sentence that ended our lives as we knew them. "I'm so sorry. Your daughter died from what appears to be sudden infant death syndrome." Michael collapsed against the wall, sliding down until he hit the floor, burying his face in his hands. I stood frozen, a statue of grief, unable to process the words. This couldn't be real. We'd done everything right. Emily slept on her back in a bare crib. We kept the room at the perfect temperature. We followed every guideline. Yet, there we were, in a sterile room, being asked if we wanted to hold our daughter one last time. We spent hours with Emily's body, memorizing the curve of her nose, the length of her eyelashes, holding her cold little hands, kissing her forehead until the warmth of our lips faded. The hospital chaplain came and prayed. A grief counselor spoke to us in soft tones. Someone mentioned funeral arrangements, and the word funeral hit me like a physical blow. Eventually, I remembered I had to call my parents. I walked into the hallway, my hands shaking so badly I dropped the phone twice. I dialed my mother's number, desperate for her voice, for her to be a mother. "Mom," I said when she answered, my voice breaking into 1,000 pieces. "Emily died last night. SIDS. We're at the hospital now." There was a pause. A silence that stretched for a heartbeat too long. Then she responded, "Oh, Abby, that's terrible." No gasp. No tears. No immediate promise to get in the car and drive to us. Just a flat acknowledgement of information, as if I had told her the car had broken down. "We need to arrange a funeral," I continued, desperate for her to understand the magnitude of this, to offer support. "Yes, I suppose you do," she said. "Let us know the details." That was it. No questions about how we were surviving. No offer to come help. Michael's parents, in contrast, were already halfway to the hospital, having dropped everything the second we called, speeding down the highway in their pajamas. The next few days passed in a gray haze of paperwork, decisions, and overwhelming grief. Michael and I moved through the world like ghosts, barely eating, barely sleeping, jumping at phantom cries we thought we heard from the nursery. His parents took care of the practical matters, contacting the funeral home, ordering flowers, arranging for food, because we were incapacitated. My parents called exactly once, and it was only to ask when the funeral would be. Friday at 11 o'clock, I told my mother, sitting on the floor of the nursery, holding Emily's favorite blanket. At Greenview Cemetery. Friday, she repeated, and I heard a sigh on the other end. Oh dear. That's the day of Jason's pool party to celebrate his engagement. We've already committed to that. I thought I had misheard her. My brain couldn't compute the sentence. Mom, this is Emily's funeral. Your granddaughter's funeral. I understand that, Abby, but we can't cancel on Jason now. All the arrangements are made. The caterers, the guests, everyone is coming. You understand, don't you? I didn't understand. I couldn't comprehend how the woman who gave birth to me could choose a party with finger foods and cocktails over her granddaughter's burial. No, Mom. I don't understand. Please explain it to me. She sighed again, the sound crackling through the phone, sharp with impatience. Abby, I know you're upset, but think rationally. It's just a baby. Your brother's party matters more right now. Emily was only here for a few months. You can always have another baby. But Jason's engagement is important to his future. The words hit me with the force of a physical assault. It's just a baby. Your brother's party matters more. You can always have another baby. In that moment, something inside me hardened. The hurt was so profound it bypassed tears and transformed into a cold, crystalline clarity about who my parents truly were. I see, was all I could manage to say before hanging up. Michael found me sitting there, phone in hand, staring at the wall. When I told him what she had said, his face contorted with a rage I had never seen in him. He wanted to call them back, to scream, to tear them apart verbally, but I stopped him. I felt hollow beyond anger. It doesn't matter, I said, my voice dead. It's always been this way. I just never wanted to admit it. The morning of the funeral dawned bright and clear, cruelly beautiful for such a dark day. I stood in front of my closet, staring at the black dress I'd bought the day before, trying to comprehend that I was dressing for my child's burial. As we drove to the cemetery, I checked my phone one last time, harboring a desperate, foolish hope that my parents had changed their minds, that they would be there waiting for us. There were no messages from them. Instead, there was a text from Jason. Sorry about the baby. Hope the funeral goes okay. Excited to see everyone at the party later. I turned off my phone, feeling a wave of nausea. Emily's casket was impossibly small. White with silver handles adorned with pink roses, it looked like a jewelry box, something that should hold treasures, not my child. Standing beside it in the cemetery, surrounded by the weeping faces of friends, colleagues, and neighbors, I felt detached from reality. Michael stood beside me, his face pale as marble, his hand gripping mine so tightly his knuckles were white. His parents flanked us, his mother openly sobbing, his father steady but red-eyed. The conspicuous absence of my parents and brother created a void that everyone politely pretended not to notice, though I caught the questioning glances, the confused whispers among the guests. Michael's mother had placed a protective arm around my shoulders, shielding me from the unspoken questions. Pastor David spoke about the brevity of Emily's life, about the depth of her impact, saying, "Some souls accomplish their purpose here on earth quickly." During the service, my phone vibrated in my purse. I ignored it until after the final prayer. When I checked it, I saw several Instagram notifications. Jason had posted photos from his pool party. There were my parents, prominently featured, smiling with champagne glasses in hand, laughing, sunbathing, celebrating. The timestamp showed the photo was taken while my daughter was being lowered into the ground 3 miles away. The contrast between the dirt hitting the casket and the clink of their glasses broke something in me forever. When it came time for the burial, I nearly collapsed. The physical act of watching that tiny white box descend into the dark earth made Emily's death real in a way nothing else had. This was final. This was forever. My baby was gone, and I would never hold her again. Michael's father had to help support him as he threw the handful of dirt onto the casket. Michael's mother held me up as I did the same, my entire body shaking with violent sobs. Around us, others followed suit, murmuring prayers. Later, at our house, people gathered with food and flowers, offering well-intentioned words that couldn't touch my grief. I moved through the rooms like an automaton. After everyone left, Michael and I stood in Emily's nursery. The crib where she died, the changing table with diapers still stacked, the rocking chair, we couldn't touch anything. The week following the funeral passed in a haze. I took leave from work. Michael tried to go back, but came home early, unable to focus. My parents didn't call. They didn't text. They didn't visit. Michael's parents came daily, quietly taking care of us. 7 days after the funeral, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Abby, how are you?" she asked, her voice casual, as if we'd simply gone a week without talking. "How do you think I am?" I replied, my voice raspy. "Now, Abby, there's no need for that tone. We're calling to invite you and Michael to Sunday dinner. It would be good for you to get out of the house. Jason and Stephanie will be there. They can tell you all about their wedding plans. It might take your mind off things." Take my mind off things. As if my child's death were a minor inconvenience, like a parking ticket. "I don't think we'll be able to make it," I said. "Abby, you can't just shut yourself away. Life goes on." It's been a week already. A week. A week since I buried my daughter. "I have to go," I said, and hung up. But against my better judgment, and perhaps driven by a masochistic need to see the monster in the daylight, I agreed to attend the dinner 2 weeks after the funeral. Michael was reluctant, but he drove us to the suburban colonial home where I grew up. My mother greeted us with air kisses, careful not to smudge her lipstick. My father nodded from his armchair. Jason and Stephanie sat on the couch, wedding magazines spread before them. "Abby, Michael, come in." Jason was just showing us the venue they're considering, my mother chirped. There was no mention of Emily. No hug. No, "How are you holding up?" We sat stiffly on the love seat while Jason dominated the conversation with budget details and honeymoon options. I noticed a new photo on the mantle, Jason and Stephanie at the pool party, the party they chose over the funeral. During dinner, my mother served roast beef, Jason's favorite. The conversation revolved entirely around Jason. Finally, during dessert, I couldn't take it anymore. The rage that had been simmering boiled over. "Did Emily's funeral interfere with your pool party?" I asked, my voice cutting through a discussion about photographers. The table fell silent. My mother's smile froze. "Abby," she said with a nervous laugh, "let's not bring up unpleasant topics at dinner." "Unpleasant topics?" I repeated, leaning forward. "You mean my daughter's death? Your granddaughter's funeral that you skipped?" "Now, Abby," my father interjected, wiping his mouth. "What's done is done. No sense dwelling on the past." "The past? It was 2 weeks ago." Jason rolled his eyes. "See? This is why we didn't want to bring it up. You always make everything so dramatic, Abby." I stared at him, incredulous. "Dramatic? My baby died, Jason. And none of you came to her funeral because you were too busy having a pool party." "It wasn't just a pool party," my mother said defensively. "It was a celebration of Jason's engagement. We couldn't cancel at the last minute. But you could miss your granddaughter's funeral. You could tell me it's just a baby and that I can always have another one." Michael slammed his fork down. "I've sat here trying to be respectful, but this is beyond belief. Do you have any idea what we've been through?" "Of course we do," my mother said, looking affronted. "But life must go on. Dwelling in grief isn't healthy." "It's been 2 weeks," Michael said, his voice dangerously quiet. 2 weeks. "Actually," my mother said, and this is the part that truly sickened me, Several relatives asked where we were during the funeral. We told them we couldn't attend due to health issues. Your father's back, you know. The lie hung in the air, thick and suffocating. They were ashamed enough to lie to the extended family, but not ashamed enough to show up. You lied? I whispered. Well, we could hardly tell them we were at a pool party, could we? People wouldn't understand. I don't understand, I said, standing up. And I never will. We walked out. Over the next month, Michael and I began seeing a grief counselor, Dr. Patrice. I unpacked a lifetime of favoritism, the missed recitals, the forgotten birthdays, the golden child dynamic. Dr. Patrice helped me see that this wasn't just about the funeral, it was the climax of a lifetime of being treated as less than. I realized I needed them to understand what they had done. I needed to confront them, not for their sake, but for mine. I started by declining the invitation to Jason's engagement party. The pressure was immediate. Family needs to stick together, my mother argued. Was Emily's funeral important to you? I countered. Jason called, saying, Mom and Dad are upset. Can you just show up? You visited her once, I told him. I won't be attending. I spent 2 months gathering evidence, birthday cards with generic messages, photos where I was pushed to the side, and a timeline of their neglect culminating in the funeral. I reached out to aunts and uncles, confirming the lies my parents had told about their absence. Then I texted my parents. I'd like to meet to discuss moving forward. Just the 3 of us. My mother replied, wonderful. I'll make lemon cake. The casualness made me nauseous. I arrived at their house with a framed photo of Emily and my evidence folder. The house smelled of lemon and sugar, a scent that now felt like a mockery. We sat in the living room. I'd prefer to talk before cake, I said. I placed Emily's photo on the coffee table. This is your granddaughter. The Emily whose funeral you skipped for a pool party. The Emily you called just a baby. My mother looked uncomfortable. Abby, we had a prior commitment. I have something to show you. I handed them the timeline and the screenshots of their Instagram posts from the day of the funeral. This is a record of your choices. A pattern that ended with you sipping champagne while I buried my child. My father turned red. We didn't think it would look good to cancel. No, it wouldn't look good. Because it was cruel. I pulled out a letter I had written. I don't want you to say anything. I want you to listen. I read the letter, pouring out the years of pain, explaining that their choice to skip the funeral invalidated Emily's entire existence to me. I told them that I was stepping back from the relationship to heal, not just from the loss of my child, but from the trauma of their response to it. When I finished, my mother was crying silently. My father sat rigid. You can't be serious, he said. Cutting us off over one event? It wasn't one event, I said. It was a lifetime of events. My mother reached for the photo of Emily. She had your eyes, she whispered. I never really looked at her. I was always so busy with Jason's things. I stood up. I've said what I came to say. The ball is in your court. Until you can acknowledge the reality of what happened, I need distance. I walked out, feeling a strange mixture of grief and liberation. In the months that followed, the truth spread through the extended family. The narrative my parents had constructed crumbled. My Aunt Judith texted me, horrified by the truth. 3 months later, I received a letter from my father. I have never been good with emotions, he wrote. But after reading your letter and seeing the timeline, we were wrong. Terribly, unforgivably wrong. I am truly sorry. It wasn't perfect, but it was an acknowledgement. My mother sent a custom ornament with Emily's name and a note. I should have been there. I will regret that choice for the rest of my life. Even Jason showed up at my door one rainy April afternoon. We planted a rose bush in Emily's memorial garden together. I never really thought about how things looked from your side, he admitted. I should have been at her funeral. She was my niece. We established a new normal. Careful boundaries. Monthly dinners where Emily's name was spoken with respect. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, the scars were deep and permanent, but it was progress. I began volunteering with a support group for infant loss, using my story to help other mothers stand up for their grief. On the 1-year anniversary of Emily's death, we stood in the garden. My parents were there, standing awkwardly but respectfully. As we released balloons, I felt Emily's presence. She had taught us about the fragility of life, and in her death, she forced a broken family to finally face the truth. I had lost my daughter, and that pain would never fully heal, but I had found my voice. For anyone watching who has been told their grief doesn't matter, or that they should just move on, know this: honoring your truth is the most important thing you can do. You are not alone. Thanks for watching. If this story touched you, please share it. Take care of yourselves.